7 of Europe's most powerful nations just issued a joint statement defending Greenland against American threats. But here's what nobody's really telling the public. This was not just a diplomatic rebuke. This was Europe drawing a line that could fracture the entire transatlantic alliance. And when the dust settles, America will have lost an economic war that it didn't even know it was fighting. I'm Elle, I have a PhD in computer science and I work in finance where reading the numbers behind geopolitical posturing is literally part of my job. And what I'm seeing in the public data right now is a pattern that should terrify anyone who understands how economic leverage actually works. Trump thinks that he is winning because he's threatening military force, but Europe just played a financial chess move that Trump doesn't even see on the board. Let me start with the economic realities that frame this entire conflict. The European Union's GDP is estimated at $19.99 trillion in 2025. The United States GDP is about $30.5 trillion. On paper, America is bigger. That's what Trump sees, and that's probably why he thinks economic threats will work. But here's what the official data actually reveals. The EU has total banking assets of more than $38 trillion, with France accounting for 26%, Germany 18%, and Italy 8%. Global assets under management in the EU is more than 12 trillion as well. When financial professionals analyze leverage, they don't just look at GDP, they look at coordinated capital deployment capacity. And 7 European nations, France, Germany, UK, Italy, Spain, Poland, Denmark, just signal that they're willing to coordinate that capital against American interest. Now let's talk about the specific threat Trump made. Trump threatened to impose very high tariffs on Denmark if it resists attempt to make Greenland a US territory, and a 2024 study estimated Denmark's GDP would decline by 3% if the United States targeted Danish goods like Novo Nordisk Ozempic. We've got another video on that, check it out if you're curious. 3%, that's Trump's leverage over Denmark. Denmark's exports to the US account for between 3 and 13% of their total exports in 2024, and Denmark reports a surplus in trade with the US. Here's where Trump's calculation breaks down completely. Denmark doesn't need to absorb that 3% hit alone. Germany, France, and Italy combined account for approximately 51.9% of the EU's total GDP. If those 3 economies, which just signed that statement defending Greenland, by the way, coordinate to absorb Denmark's potential losses through trade redistribution, the 3% hit to Denmark becomes a 0.2% rounding error distributed across the EU's 2nd, 3rd, and 4th largest economies. Trump is threatening Denmark with a cost Europe can absorb without flinching at all. That's not leverage, that's more like bluff, and Europe just called it. It does pay to have alliances, doesn't it? Now, let me show the financial mechanism where Trump's entire strategy collapses, because this is where it actually gets devastating. Trump's stated justification for threatening Greenland is rare earth elements. Fine. The public reports show Greenland could possess 42 million metric tons of rare earth oxides, which would make it the 2nd largest reserve globally. According to one Greenland official, the island possesses 39 of the 50 minerals that the United States has classified as critical to national security and economic stability. That sounds compelling until professionals analyze the actual supply chain. Here's what the data reveals. China controls nearly 90% of global rare earth refining capacity in 2025 and around 90% of the world's refined rare earth supply. China produces over 300 tons of magnets annually. Now compare that to American capacity. MP Materials is expected to produce only 1,000 metric tons of neodymium iron boron magnets. I hope that I pronounced that well enough. Maybe a chemist can correct me. By 2025, representing less than 1% of the 138,000 metric tons, which China produced as early as 2018. In 2024, the US had only one operational refining facility in Texas that produced 1.3 thousand tons of neodymium praseodymium metal alloy. We essentially need to spot the difference between assets and capabilities. Greenland has assets, raw minerals inside the earth itself, but building the refining and processing parts of the supply chain are estimated to take 10 to 15 more years. The average time horizon for the development of new mines in the US is about 29 years, the world's 2nd longest. The average time to permit and license smelting and refining projects in the US is about 7 to 10 years project. Here's the financial reality Trump refuses to acknowledge. Even if America sees Greenland tomorrow magically like that, neither Greenland nor Ukraine currently mine their rare earth deposits. The Kvanefjeld project in Greenland remains on hold due to Greenland's 2021 ban on uranium mining. Ukraine will take years to develop mines and refineries, with the average rare earth element facility requiring 18 years to become operational. So Trump would fracture NATO, destroy transatlantic economic relationships, and violate international law to acquire raw materials that America can't process without Chinese infrastructure infrastructure for at least a decade. This is not strategy, this is economic illiteracy dressed up as national security. We need to think more critically than this. And here's the mechanism Europe just activated. Even with Greenland's rare earths, new mines are dependent on long-term offtake agreements with Chinese industrial groups, since rare earth elements processing capacity and industrial groups remain concentrated in China. If Europe coordinates with China, and that joint statement defending territorial integrity creates diplomatic capital with Beijing, they can simply lock America out of Chinese processing capacity entirely. Trump would control the mine, technically, but not be able to use the minerals. Europe would maintain access to Chinese processing through diplomatic channels America just burned. That's not winning, in my opinion. That's losing with a few extra steps. And let me be very direct about what Trump just triggered with the Greenland threat. The EU is the United States' largest trading partner alongside China. Transatlantic trade in goods and services is worth trillions annually. EU investments in foreign countries total 17 trillion euros, while foreign investments made in the Union total 14.46 trillion euros in 2023. This is by far the highest foreign and domestic investments in the world. When 7 European nations include a joint statement explicitly invoking Article 2.4 of the UN Charter, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, they're not just defending Denmark, they're establishing a legal and diplomatic framework for coordinated economic response. Here's what that looks like in practice. First, Europe can redirect trade flows. Nordic foreign trade shows Europe, excluding Nordic countries, accounts for 55% of imports and 56% of exports. If European nations coordinate to replace American imports with intra-European trade or trade with China, American firms lose market access worth hundreds of billions annually. Second, Europe controls financial infrastructure. The euro is the second largest reserve currency and the second most traded currency in the world after the United States dollar. Paris hosts Euronext, the largest stock exchange in the EU by market cap, with over 1 trillion GDP and Europe's strongest economic hub. If European financial institutions coordinate capital restrictions on American firms in response to international law violations, American companies face a liquidity crisis in their second largest market. This is serious. Third, and this is the mechanism most analysts miss, Europe can weaponize regulatory compliance. American tech companies, pharmaceutical firms, and financial institutions depend on European market access. If the EU coordinates new regulatory requirements or compliance costs specifically targeting American firms in response to territorial aggression,